So to the Leaf faithful, when you mentioned his name, he's sort of a patron saint of the squad. But for me, I first heard about this guy when he was coaching the WHA, and decided to fire and fine a bunch of players during a bad Toronto Toros game. I did a podcast on that, but as I learned more about him, I learned more about his legacy, and I have great respect for him. Because, when you say you're from Lanigan, Saskatchewan, you got to be tough. The man they called Boomer, Bobby Baun. Now, Bobby Baun played in the NHL for 17 years from 56 to 73. Now, he came to heavy prominence with the Toronto Marlboros of the OHA, where he played four competitive seasons as a very rugged defenseman. His best campaign, in my view, came in 1956 when he had 19 points in a regular season and 2 points in the playoffs. Now, he had a short stint in the minor leagues with Rochester of the AHL with 15 points in 46 games, but eventually was called up to Toronto and never played another game in the minor leagues ever again. Now, Baun won Stanley Cups with Toronto in 62, 63, 64, and 67, and is also considered one of the strongest and most dedicated rear guards in Leafs history. Now, Baun was one of the hardest and cleanest hitters of all his time. He was not considered an offensive threat as a defenseman, never scoring more than 20 points in a season. Now, his highest single season goal total was 8 in 1960. However, Baun is best remembered for his performance in Game 6 of the 64 Stanley Cup Finals against Detroit Red Wings. On April 23rd, he had broke his ankle early in the game. He then returned in overtime and scored the game-winning goal. The Leafs won the next game 4-0 to take the best-of-7 series and secured their third consecutive Stanley Cup championship. Now, this was comparable to what Kurt Gibson did for the Dodgers in the late 80s. And if you're an American hearing this for the first time, Kurt Gibson didn't do it first. Bobby Baun did. Think about it. Now, he developed a reputation for understanding the business side of playing in the NHL. In the years before there was even a players' union. Eventually, other players sought Baun's advice about their contracts and salaries, which eroded his relationship with Leafs GM Punch Imlach. That relationship so deteriorated when Baun was a holdout for the 65-66 season. Baun eventually got a raise, but Imlach never forgot it. A series of injuries further dimmed Imlach's enthusiasm for Baun, and in 67, Baun suffered a broken toe. Imlach replaced him with Larry Hillman, and Baun saw little ice time after that. He was mostly an observer from the bench for the Leafs' 67 Cup victory and refused to participate in the celebrations. Now, before next season, Baun was left unprotected in the 67 expansion draft and was selected by the Oakland Seals. On that team, Baun was one of 4 members of the Memorial Cup winning Marlboros teams from the mid-50s to play for the Seals, but the team struggled badly on the ice, particularly on offense, finishing the year with their worst record in the league. Baun asked to be traded back to an original 6 team, and Oakland accommodated his request, dealing to the Red Wings in May of 68. Now, Baun played in Detroit for 2 years, but early in the 71 season, he found himself at odds with coach Ned Harkness and was placed on waivers. From there, he was claimed by the Buffalo Sabres, managed by Imlach, who immediately traded him to the Blues. Baun refused to report to St. Louis, and 9 days later, he was traded back to the Maple Leafs for Brett Selby. Now, the Leafs benefited from Baun's defensive play, helping Jacques Plante to a record 1.88 goals against average in 71. Baun was just as effective next season. In the 5th game of the 73 season, he unfortunately did suffer a neck injury after a hit from Mickey Redmond that ended his NHL career at the age of 36. Baun played with a broken leg as well as having a skate cut his neck. Tim Horton found him inside the tour bus and carried him to the local hospital, where he was found to be hemorrhaging. After many pints of blood, he was placed next to his wife, who was giving birth to their 3rd son. Now, Baun retired as a player and ran a cattle farm, but 3 years later he was hired as head coach of the Toronto Tours of the WHA. Now, Mike Nicoluk, another member of the Marlboros in the mid-50s, had been the team's first choice, but he turned down the job. Now, playing for the Toros were three of Baun's former Leaf teammates, Frank Mahovlich, Paul Anderson, and Jim Dory, as well as future NHL stars Mark Napier and Vaclav Nedomansky. Unfortunately, the Toros under Baun had a disastrous year, finishing the 76 campaign with the worst record in the league. And I talked before how we fired Jim Shaw and 2 other players after a bad comeback loss to Cleveland. Now the Toros even finished 11 points behind the Minnesota Fighting Saints, a team that had folded with 21 games left to play in the season. Baun was replaced as head coach after the season, and he returned to farming and also sold insurance after his retirement from hockey. Now in the 1980s, Baun organized an NHL Alumni Association and began an investigation in the NHL's pension plan. The plan had been touted to players as the best in professional sports, but after playing in 17 NHL seasons, Baun's pension was only $7,600 a year. Baun received little support from other players and eventually gave up. Problems with the pension plan were later uncovered through an audit backed by Carl Brewer, which led, of course, to the Alan Eagleson debacle, which no podcast could even cover. That'd take like 40 days anyway. And now on June 1st, 2007, he was awarded a doctorate of laws from the University of Ottawa for his work on and off the ice. He currently resides in Ajax, Ontario. Now, in 2010, Baun was inducted into the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame several years after he should have been. But anyway, that's just another story. Now, Baun is also the grandfather of former NHL player Kyle Baun. Now, total NHL stats, 964 games, 224 points, including 37 goals, playoffs, 15 points in 96 games. And again, that terrible record with the Toros, 15, 35, and 5. Missed the playoffs and again fell behind the folded Minnesota Fighting Saints. So, see, as a Montreal Canadian fan, all I can say is that Bobby Baun deserved all the respect he got from his opponents. But he really, his idea about penny pinching, he's the first one that really stood up to Punch Imlach. Awful lot of drama. You think Harold Ballard had a lot of drama those Punch Imlach years. How he forced Frank Mahovlich out of town. How he disrespected all the, the dedicated fans. But words go to show you can't hide all the time. And Alan Eagleson, if there wouldn't be for Bobby Baun and Carl Brewer, maybe Alan Eagleson wouldn't have been found out to be the crook that he was. So, anyway, Bobby Baun, that's the legend of our great player. Please give me a comment, like, and subscribe, as this is your channel as well. Any input is well appreciated. And just remember, to do a podcast here, you must have people that is listening. So if you do listen, you're keeping the podcast going. I'd like to do these where there's response and support from the members. And I consider you people, you're sitting around a campfire just talking anecdotes and stuff. This is what it is. We're not the most professional podcast channel going, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a bunch of friends sitting around and saying, hey, do you remember Bobby Baun when he hit that, hit Beliveau or, hit Bobby Hull? Then, that's what you want to do. There's a lot of negativity in the world. It's time we tell stories that are ours, our Canadian stories. That's what I'm getting at. Have a good day. Bye.